Hi, and welcome back to Acting for Theater. My name is Kaili, and today we're going to be covering how to handle the script for the first time. I asked you guys to pick up a copy of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief. I have my copy right here. We're going to be using this book for our activities throughout the course of the month. So, if you haven't gotten your copy yet, I highly encourage you to check out a library or to check out your local bookstore. Today, we're going to be focusing mostly on Chapter 1, so if you haven't gotten your copy and you haven't read it yet, that's totally fine. You'll still be able to participate in today's activity. Before we get started today, I'm going to invite you to go to readriordan.com and take the Which God Are You Descended From quiz to figure out what cabin you'd be in at Camp Half-Blood and who your godly parent is. This is my result. I'm excited to see what you got. Alright, your audition went well, you've been cast in the show. Now what do you do? Today we're going to be talking about the 4 things you do as soon as you have the script in your hands. Let's get started. Number 1, the initial overview. This is your first glance through the script, and here are some things you need to look for. Is this play contemporary or classical? Think back to our discussion on Monday about what those terms mean. Now, talking about Percy Jackson, is this book contemporary or classical? Well, it's pretty obviously contemporary. It was written in 2005, and as long ago as that seems, it's still contemporary. Second, is this play comedic or dramatic? Again, looking at Percy Jackson, it has a bit of both in it. It's very funny, but it also has some pretty heavy topics. For a book like Percy Jackson, it has themes of growing up, themes of family, and themes of finding out who you are. As an actor, it's very important to understand what the play is about and what the themes are. That factors greatly into your motivation as a character. Speaking of characters, who's your favorite? Mine is definitely Percy. He's just a really good friend, and I love that. Once you're done with your initial overview, it's time to move on to the second step. Who is your character? Again, let's go back to the Lightning Thief. Say you've been chosen to play Percy. You need to learn as much as you can about him. In the first chapter of The Lightning Thief, we learn a lot about who Percy is as a person. What do we learn about Percy's family life? Well, he doesn't know his dad. His mom is married to a man that he doesn't like, and his mom is an angel. We learn that in the first chapter or 2 of this book. How did the character grow up? In The Lightning Thief, we learn that Percy has moved from school to school every year for the last 6 years, and he's only 12. That is a lot of moving around. We learn that Percy has ADHD and dyslexia, which makes learning very difficult for him. We also learn that Percy doesn't really get along with a lot of his classmates or a lot of his teachers. He feels very alone. He does have one good friend named Grover, who he's very protective of and who he cares a lot about. We also learn that everyone sees Percy as troubled, partially because of his learning disorders and partially because strange things just seem to happen whenever he's around. The next thing to look at is what the world of the play is like. What is your character's status in the world? Percy Jackson is a student. He's also somebody's son and somebody's friend, but most importantly for the story, he's a demigod, which means dinner to a lot of monsters. Percy's status shapes how people treat him and how they view him. It shapes how he interacts with other characters. The relationship Percy has with his Latin teacher, Mr. Brunner, is very important to him because Mr. Brunner is so different from everyone else in his life. Mr. Brunner supports him, and he believes in him, and he pushes Percy to be his best. In a world where everyone sees Percy as a troubled kid, it's important for him to have that figure in his life. So when Percy interacts with Mr. Brunner, he's very respectful, and he's trying to do everything he can to not let this man down. When Mr. Brunner seems to be disappointed in Percy, that is a big blow for him emotionally. He's really upset that this man might not be any different from the other people in his school. Thinking about how these characters interact will really help to inform your decisions as an actor. The next thing to look at when looking at the world is who has the power. We talked already about Mr. Brunner and how he influences Percy. But who has power in this world outside of Percy? Maybe his stepdad, Gabe. Percy really doesn't like Gabe, but he can't go against him. Percy's mom has power over him. He does not want to let her down, even more than he didn't want to let down Mr. Brunner. Percy sees his mom as an angel, and that gives her some measure of influence over his decisions. He puts up with Gabe because if he didn't, it would upset his mom. Clearly, the people with the most power in this world are the gods. Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Athena. They all have influence over this world, influence over the monsters, and therefore influence over Percy's life. Without the gods' conflict, there wouldn't be much of a story. There wouldn't be a reason for Percy to change. Outside influences really inform who a character is and who a character will become. Think about that. Now, the last thing that you need to do once you get that script is start memorizing it immediately. After you know who you are and why you are the way you are, get to memorizing your lines. This can be a big chore, but if we break it down into some simple, easy to follow steps, then it can be manageable and it can be done in a timely fashion. Here's some tips on how to do that. The first tip for memorizing your lines is to write them out in another way or another place than you were given them. If you were given a script in a book, something like this, of course this isn't a script, this is an actual book, but sometimes you'll get scripts that have a spine, that are bound, and they're a little hard to work with. So I suggest either writing them out by hand or typing them up on a computer or other device. When you write out your lines, it creates a tie from your hand to your brain to the words. It makes it easier to see each word. And what do I mean by see each word? I don't mean just reading the words. What I mean is that you give each word the attention that it needs. Tip number 2 is to run your lines out loud. You can do this with a parent, with a friend, with a co-star, or just saying it out loud to your wall. When you speak the lines out loud, it creates another type from your voice to your brain. Speech includes rhythm. That's why we remember songs so easily, because they are words spoken to a rhythm. The third tip is to know what is going on in the scene. If you know what's happening, you'll know how your character responds to it. So, if somebody in the scene says, "I like chocolate milk," and your character's response is, "I do too. Did you know it comes from brown cows?" Knowing what comes before your line, knowing what's happening in the scene, will help you to better remember what your character is thinking and therefore what they are going to talk about. This ties into the fourth tip of learning your cue lines. What is a cue line? A cue line is the line that comes before your line. So your cue line would be, "I love chocolate milk." Going back to our earlier tip, when writing down your lines, it can help to write down the line before yours as well. That way, it creates another connection between that line and your line. Next week, we're going to continue our work with Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief. I really suggest you find a copy of it because it is such a great book. To work on our memorization and our characterization skills, I want you to memorize the first paragraph of The Lightning Thief. If you still can't get a copy of it in time for our next lesson, then I will include a picture of the paragraph here. You can give the monologue as Percy, thinking of who he is and where he's coming from, or you can give the monologue as yourself. Put yourself into his shoes and see what kind of new things you can pull out of the words. That's all acting is, pulling meaning out of words and creating character. If you want, and with your parents' permission, go ahead and film yourself giving the monologue and post it to our exclusive Facebook group. Thanks again for hanging out with me. I hope you had fun, and I'll see you next time. Have fun, actors!